The stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to PMQs Live with me, Gloria De Piero. In just a few moments, we'll be going live to the Commons for Prime Minister's Question Time. I am joined by a fantastic panel of politicians who'll be giving their verdicts. And with two by-elections tomorrow in Yorkshire and Devon, we'll be testing the mood in both on the last day of campaigning. So let's meet one member of our panel now, the Conservative MP for South Thanet, Craig McKinley, and the Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Barr, Khalid Mahmood, is en route and will be with us shortly. But thank you for joining me, Craig. What would you ask today for the Prime Minister's Question?
We have got a very, I think, important announcement coming out of the British Geological Survey at the end of June regarding the safety or otherwise of shale gas extraction. It would be based on shale gas extraction, the importance to energy security, and weaning ourselves off reliance on foreign gas. So it would be along those lines to say, will the PM use the power of his good office to make sure that the outcome of that report is as positive as it can be?
And what do you think he would say back to you? Do you think you've got friends in high places on this one, or just a few on the back benches?
Well, I would say, as you know, I'm chairman of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group. I think we have moved the dial a little. There is a lot more exploration going on in the North Sea. That's very important. Obviously, the Ukraine war has, I think, concentrated minds on energy security and price and all of those good things. But the reality is, bringing in LNG ships from Qatar or the US is hugely CO2 inefficient for obvious reasons. It has to be frozen to minus 170, transported across an ocean on a diesel-powered ship, and then regasified. And to do that domestically would be better for CO2 because no matter whether we like it or not, gas is going to be part of our energy mix for a very long time. My view is if we've got it domestically, for heaven's sake, let's get it out of the ground domestically and have the jobs, investment, tax and saving a lot of our balance of payments problems as well. So that's very much in my mind at the moment, and we should get an announcement at the end of the month.
I'm sure there's lots in the Prime Minister's mind. Not least, there's two by-elections tomorrow. It's not very often that sitting governments get two by-elections to test of public opinions, both at opposite ends of the country, one in Wakefield, Redwall, one where the Liberal Democrats are challengers down in Devon. How well does your party have to do tomorrow?
People always take a lot of store, well, I will say this anyway, wouldn't I? But people always take a lot of store about by-elections, that this is, a mood of the country. Let's be very honest, by-elections are not going to change government. Mm-hmm. They are a testing of the water a little bit mid-term. So, both of them are resignations under some cloudy circumstances, which is never a good place to start. And I often find the public, they really don't like having elections foisted upon them. I mean, a number of times, I think it was back in 17 when we'd had local elections, and then a month later with the general election, you knock on the first door and people go, oh no, not another election. So they're sometimes not keen on elections. But of course we had the background of Partygate, which I think is maybe still in people's minds. I think a lot of that has gone under the bridge now. It's very strange that in Tiverton, very big Leave-sea, Honiton Tiverton, very big Leave seat, hugely Conservative seat, that there would be any chance at all that Lib Dems would get through from 15% they had last time. So, that's an interesting one in one of those Lib Dem-facing seats. Wakefield, obviously, the first time we'd had it for 80-odd years. Yeah. So tough at the time, even when we won it in 19 on the back of Brexit and all that enthusiasm. Realistically, I think it's going to be tough. But we've got a good candidate up there, local, very entrenched, well-known. So I think it's in the air, frankly. But how well do we have to do? If we win, I'll be delighted. If we lose, I'll be giving excuses that this is only midterm and it really doesn't matter very much. So I'm getting all bases covered.
You supported the Prime Minister. You're a supporter of Boris Johnson. You voted for him at the time, and you voted for him to say that you had confidence in him. There'll be some people, or perhaps there won't, you can tell me, in your party, that if you lose one or both of those by-elections tomorrow, that they will renew their attempts to get rid of him and say he's an electoral liability. How loud or otherwise do you think those voices might be on Friday?
I'm sorry to say, with some colleagues, it will need very little excuse to keep that call going. And obviously, if we lose both of those, they will be using that as an opportunity to make that call once more. But next week, it might be, stepping on the crack in the pavement. So I think some people don't need much of an excuse to try and resurrect their opposition to the PM for whatever reason. Some just never liked Boris, for I don't know why, but they never liked him. There are some who feel that they are worried about the Northern Ireland Protocol and Brexit and all of those sort of things, still fighting that battle. There are others who think they're so marvellous they should be in government, or others who have been reshuffled out. And then there are some who want us to get back to some proper right-of-centre Conservative policies. I'd be in that camp. That's what I'm looking for, but I accept it's a broad church. And nudging by being in a group like the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, like being in the RG and others that I'm part of, I think is the way forward to get my voice through to number 10. But these disparate groups I don't think will stop. Sometimes they're sounding a little bit like the Scottish National Party, where they just want a referendum after referendum after referendum until they get their way. But he won, and many have very graciously said, didn't support him, but he won, let's get on with the job. That's what I'd hope colleagues will now do.
When your leaders, are subject to these sort of votes, even when they win, even when but when it's first started, this process, it never has a happy ending that I can recall. Is it inevitable that Boris Johnson they'll come for him again, his critics, or can he defy the normal laws of history, Conservative history on this one?
Yeah, generally, once you've hit that vote of no confidence threshold, there seems to be only one outcome. It might take a short time or a long time. I think Boris is more unusual in that he has these different forces that are opposed to him, and some of those can be actually brought back on side. So I think it's a little different, and we know what Boris is like. He does tend to defy the laws of political gravity at times, and I think he will come through it. So I think he will confound that once more. But yes, I've always likened this to the cavemen of old with sharpened sticks, trying to get the mammoth down. One stick doesn't bring them down, but lots of them over time usually does. But I think he'll defy this.
Right, let's talk about the government's big announcement today. There'll be a ministerial statement from the Justice Secretary later today. So legislation will be presented to enable the British government to overrule European judges. You're going to stay in the European Convention of Human Rights, but you can consider their advice, but not take it. Is that enough for people like you on the Eurosceptic wing of the party? Is that music to your ears, or would you rather just leave the European Convention of Human Rights altogether?
I think doing a knee-jerk reaction on the back of a bad decision, which I would accept the Rwanda one was a very poor decision, is often not the best place to start. Now, let's go back to why we had the ECHR. It was founded in the remnants of the Second World War so that new nascent nations could have a foundation of what you call decent behaviour and relationship between citizens and their states. That was fine, and Britain was very much part of that. We wrote most of it. That was a long time ago. Is that appropriate for the UK now to be taking instruction from a supranational court? I've got grave concerns about supranationality when our courts are more than adequate to protect my rights. We've got the common law values, we've got legislative values, and last week I think the Rwanda one was particularly obtuse. It was a Rule 39 ruling which doesn't actually have to be complied with by a judge in chambers with no oral evidence, and we don't even know who the judge is. And perversely, a Russian judge, Russia has been thrown out the ECHR and the Council of Europe, he still sits. So this is a rather perverse court, a perverse ruling that had gone through every court in the land in the UK, including our Supreme Court. I have got every confidence of the professionalism and ability to come up with human rights values within the UK. So if this new legislation clips the wings of that a little, I'll be delighted. But no, I'm happy that we're still part of that gang, because there is there's good work to be done to actually encourage decent behaviour amongst other countries.
Let's talk about the big underlying issue which sort of underpins everything. It's what's on the top of everyone's minds. New figures out today on the cost of living. UK inflation hit a fresh 40-year high last month. That's driven by increases in food prices, increases in petrol prices. The Speaker is on his feet. We are going live to Prime Minister's questions.
We now start with questions to Prime Minister Chris Elmore.
Number one, sir. Mr. Speaker, to mark Windrush Day, today sees the unveiling of a national monument at Waterloo Station that acknowledges the Windrush generation's outstanding contribution to British society and will also be a permanent place of reflection. Mr. Speaker, as part of Armed Forces Week, I was delighted to host a reception yesterday in Downing Street. Members across the House are immensely proud of our armed forces, and we thank them and their families for their service to our country. And Mr. Speaker, I know the House will welcome the deal that we've signed with Moderna, which will see them build new facilities in the UK, including around £1 billion of new investment in research and development. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today, and I will be travelling thereafter to Chogum in Rwanda. I will then be attending the G7 Leaders Summit and the NATO Summit, Mr. Speaker, so a full budget of news for you there.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's comments in relation to the armed forces and other comments? Prime Minister, has he ever considered the appointment of his current spouse to a government post or to any organisation in one of the royal households? Be honest, Prime Minister, yes or no?
Yes or no? Mr. Speaker, I know why the party opposite wants to talk about non-existent jobs in the media, Mr. Speaker, because they don't want to talk about what's going on in the real world. I'm proud to say, actually, that we now have 620,000 people more in payroll employment than before the pandemic began, which would never have been possible if we listened to the right honourable gentleman opposite.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is the global leader in social outcomes contracts. They can deliver public services in an array of areas, from healthcare, mental health care, employment, education and development aid. According to Big Society Capital, every £1 the government has spent in this way has delivered £10 in a further economic, social and fiscal value, including £3 in direct savings to government. Does my right honourable friend agree that the time is right for the government to redouble its focus on these outcomes-led commissioning?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to champion this type of approach, which makes a real difference to people's lives, people suffering from mental health issues, helping them to find a route back into work. And that's why we are commissioning more initiatives through such funds as the Life Chances Fund, helping those people in society who face the biggest barriers to have happy and productive lives.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about Windrush? And can I pay tribute to everyone who is serving and has served in our armed forces? can I also pay tribute to everyone standing for election tomorrow? In particular, the plucky Conservative candidate for Wakefield. He's standing even though his own colleagues think he's so useless they held a vote of no confidence in him. Does the Prime Minister hold any personal interest in seeing if the public will vote for a Tory that even his own side don't think is up to it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've absolutely no doubt that the people of this country and the people of Wakefield, people of Tiverton and Honiton would much rather vote for a solid Conservative government than for a Labour Party. They're enablers and acolytes in the Liberal Democrats, Mr. Speaker, the chameleons, the karma chameleons of British politics. When the leader of the Labour Party hasn't even got the gumption, Mr. Speaker, to speak out against the rail strikes to the people in the north of this country, up and down this country. Absolutely unbelievable silence from the leader of the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker.
He's obviously not been to Wakefield recently. He's crashed the economy. He's put everybody's tax up. The last Tory sent up to Wakefield being convicted of a sexual assault. That's not much of a pitch, Prime Minister. Talking of people not up to the job, whilst the Transport Secretary spends his time working on his spreadsheet tracking the Prime Minister's unpopularity, thousands of families have had their holiday flights cancelled. It takes forever to renew your driving licence or passport, and now we've got the biggest rail strike in 30 years. If he is genuine,
Both sides, let's calm down, we've only just started. The problem is he'll go on forever and nobody wants that, I assure you. Whoever's speaking or asking questions, Keir Starmer.
If he's genuine about preventing strikes, will the Prime Minister tell this House how many meetings he or his Transport Secretary have had with rail workers this week to actually stop the strikes?
Mr. Speaker, this is the government that loves the railways, that invests in the railways. Not £96 billion we're putting into the integrated railway plan building. Not just, I'm proud to have built Crossrail, by the way, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to build Northern Powerhouse Rail. But what we've got to do is modernise our railways. And it is a disgrace when we are planning to make sure that you don't have ticket offices that sell fewer than one ticket every hour, Mr. Speaker, that he yesterday had 25 Labour MPs out on the picket line, defying instructions.
I want to hear the Prime Minister's answer, even if you don't. I think you ought to show some respect for the Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Out on the 25, and the shadow deputy leader, out on the picket line, Mr. Speaker, backing the strikers, Mr. Speaker, while we back the strivers.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised he's giving me advice about my team. If I do need advice, let's say about a £100,000 job at the Foreign Office, I will ask him for recommendation. And there you, Mr. Speaker, there you have it. The Prime Minister of this country and his Transport Secretary haven't attended a single meeting, held a conversation, or lifted a finger to stop these strikes. But I did note that on Monday they did find time to go to a lavish ball where the Prime Minister sold a meeting with himself for £120,000 to a donor. If there's money coming his way, he's there. He's nowhere to be seen. So rather than blame everyone else, why doesn't he do his job, get round the table and get the trains running?
Mr. Speaker, we are making sure that we do everything we can to prevent these strikes. As he knows, it is up to the railway companies to negotiate. That is their job. We've spent £16 billion looking after the railways, Mr. Speaker, throughout the pandemic. That's cost every household £600. And at the same time, we know why he takes the line he does. We know why he won't condemn the strikes. We know why even now he hasn't got the gumption to call out his MPs who are going out to support the pickets, Mr. Speaker. The reason his authority is on the line in this matter is that they take £10 million from the unions, Mr. Speaker. That's the fee that the learned gentleman opposite is receiving for the case he is failing to make.
He can't help himself. There's a huge problem facing the country, and all he's interested in doing is blaming everyone else. Can't he hear the country screaming at him, "Get on with your job"? Whilst he blames everyone and anyone, working people are paying the price. This week, his Treasury Minister said there's a society-wide responsibility for people to take a pay cut. At the same time, his Chief of Staff is trying to change the law to get bankers' bonuses increased. So come on, only one of them can be right. Is it his Treasury Minister who says every worker needs a pay cut? Or is it his Chief of Staff who says every banker needs a pay rise?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, under this government, 5 million public sector workers are getting a pay rise, Mr. Speaker. We've increased the living wage by £1,000. We've increased universal credit so that people get £1,000 more. Thanks to the fiscal firepower that we have, Mr. Speaker, we're putting £1,200 more into every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in the country. That is what we can do because of the tough decisions that we have taken, Mr. Speaker. But meantime, what we're also trying to do is cut the costs of transport, which is a big part of people's weekly outgoings, by reforming our railways. That's what we're trying to do. But he's standing with the strikers, Mr. Speaker, and lifting the cost of transport for everybody. That's the reality.
His Chief of Staff says that removing the cap on bankers' bonuses is, in his words, reflective of our new approach. Pay rises for city bankers, pay cuts for district nurses. That's the new approach. Mr. Speaker, I didn't see that on any leaflets in Wakefield. But this hasn't come from nowhere, because according to the Financial Times, on the 7th of June last year, the Prime Minister was directly lobbied for the cap to be lifted. Rather than help working people, he's rolled over on bankers' bonuses, hasn't he?
Mr. Speaker, what we're actually doing is putting, thanks to the decisions we've taken, we are putting more money into the pockets of people up and down the country, £1,200 more for the 8 million most vulnerable households. And the reason we can do that, Mr. Speaker, is because we took the tough decisions necessary to come out of the pandemic faster than any other European country. That's why we have unemployment at or near record lows, Mr. Speaker. None of that would have been possible if we had listened to him. And we have more people now in payroll employment than we had before the pandemic began. That is what the British people know, and that is what this government is going to continue to deliver.
15 tax rises, high tax, low wages, low growth. That sums his government up. Working people paying more tax under this government, and now they're told to take a pay cut. He's having meetings about increasing bankers' bonuses, but he can't find time for a single meeting to end the strikes crippling the country. Mr. Speaker, it's Armed Forces Week. Under this Prime Minister, those serving our country are facing a real terms tax pay cut. Why is his government more focused on increasing
Order. Mr. McNeil, your voice isn't quiet, it's like mine, it curries. So the best thing to do, if you want it to curry, try standing on the turris for a while.
Mr. Speaker, it's Armed Forces Week. Under this Prime Minister, those serving our country are facing a real terms pay cut. Why is his government more focused on increasing bankers' pay than the pay of those that are running the country?
Mr. Speaker, how absolutely satirical that he should talk about our our support for the armed forces when we've increased our funding for our armed forces by a record sum since the end of the Cold War, and when 8 of the shadow front bench actually want to get rid of our nuclear deterrent, Mr. Speaker, including the shadow foreign secretary. We're helping people up. Yes, it's true. Maybe it's true, Mr. Speaker. We are helping people up and down the country. £1,200 will be coming into their bank accounts of the 8 million most vulnerable households. The cut in national insurance will be coming into their bank accounts as a result of the steps my right honourable friend is saying. But what we're also doing is reforming our systems so we cut costs for people up and down the country. Reforming our energy markets, building a nuclear reactor every year rather than one every 10 years, Mr. Speaker, getting people off welfare into work. 500,000 people off welfare into work because we cut the time people are waiting on benefits, Mr. Speaker, and cutting the costs of transport for working people, Mr. Speaker, by delivering reforms while they're out on the picket line, literally holding hands with Arthur Scargill, Mr. Speaker. That's them. It's worse than under Jeremy Corbyn. This is a government that is taking this country forward. They would take it back to the 1970s.
For years in Harrogate and Knaresborough, we had the Labour no-growth Northern Rail franchise. We now have new rolling stock, more and better services. We have, though, seen some lost as the industries had to suspend some services while they catch up on driver training lost during the pandemic. Strikes just takes us back to the 1970s. So will the Prime Minister's focus on the future ensure that we have apprenticeship schemes focusing on engineering and driver training to ensure that we recover the services lost and we have an industry that's focused upon efficiency and embraces technology for the future?
My right honourable friend knows exactly what he speaks, and we're doing just that. We're reforming driver training to make entry into the sector simpler, whilst continuing, of course, to make sure that we meet vital safety requirements.
We now come to Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Labour Party as we mark armed services? We can thank all our service personnel for the services that they give. Mr. Speaker, on Windrush Day, we celebrate all those who have made Scotland and the UK their home. My party backs calls for a major commemoration for the 75th anniversary next year, so we can properly mark the valued contribution that those that came here have made. Mr. Speaker, this morning it was revealed that UK inflation is now at a 40-year high. Families right across these islands are seeing their income squeezed as prices rise, bills soar, and Tory cuts and tax hikes hammer home. After 12 years in government, the Tories have left the UK economy in the doldrums and pushed millions of people into poverty. So, can I ask the Prime Minister, does he think his government bears any blame for the fact that the United Kingdom is doing so much worse than our European neighbours?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, I think the whole House knows and the whole country knows we've got a global inflationary problem, but this government has the fiscal firepower to deal with it, Mr. Speaker, and that is, I think, of benefit to the whole of the United Kingdom, including Scotland, as we've seen throughout the pandemic. And I think it's a matter of fact that taxes are actually highest of all in Scotland, Mr. Speaker.
Ian Blackford.
Well, actually, that is not true, Mr. Speaker. But of course, the Prime Minister can make all the excuses he likes. But the fact is, the UK economy is lagging behind on his watch. Actually, if he looks at France, inflation is less than 6% there. This morning's report from the Resolution Foundation and the London School of Economics is the latest in a string of devastating reports on the outlook for the UK economy. The report could not be clearer. The Tory government's disastrous Brexit is driving wages down, pushing inflation up, and will make us poorer over the next decade. But instead of reversing course, the Prime Minister is recklessly threatening a trade war at the worst possible time. Will he finally come to his senses and negotiate an economic agreement with the EU, or is he going to willfully push the UK into recession?
Mr. Speaker, nobody wants a trade war, nor is there any need for one. But I think I'm afraid he's underestimating what this country is currently achieving. Not just the Moderna investment, but a record venture capital investment in this country, which has now overtaken China, Mr. Speaker, as a venue for venture capital investment, and not to say nothing of what we're getting in tech. And that, of course, Mr. Speaker, the benefits of that are being felt throughout the whole of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much support the work of this government to level up all parts of the United Kingdom, including Scotland and my own constituency in the Scottish Borders. For the Scottish Borders, improved transport connectivity is the key to levelling up. So will the Prime Minister reconfirm his government's support for improvements to the cross-border A1 road and also the feasibility study to extend the Borders Railway to Hoyt, Newcastleton and on to Carlisle?
I thank him for an excellent piece of lobbying, and I can tell him that we're looking, certainly the Department of Transport is working with Transport Scotland on the possible extension of the Borders Railway to Carlisle, and on the A1 a decision is to be made later this year.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's emerged that there is a backlog of 23,000 applications under the Afghan Relocation and Assistance Policy, with just 2 of 3,000 applications for refuge by Afghans who worked for Britain processed since April. Yet at the same time, staff working on the Arab scheme have been slashed by a quarter since December. This is an incredible betrayal of the Afghan people who put their lives on the line to work for our country. So, I still have casework many people from the Chevening alumni, for example, who've been promised support since September. Can I send those cases to him? Will he put more resources into the scheme, and will he lift the cap on the ACRS scheme so that we can finally do our best for the people of Afghanistan?
I thank her very much, but I think I'm afraid that she's underestimating what this country is already doing for the people of Afghanistan. And I think on Armed Forces Day we should celebrate pitting that brought 15,000 out. I'm of course very happy to look at the cases that she wants to raise, and we will do our best for them and for their families, Mr. Speaker. But this House should be in no doubt of the generous welcome that we continue to give to people from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, from Hong Kong. We have a record to be very proud of.
Andy Carter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Chapelford, in Penketh, in Great Sankey and in Appleton all tell me they want to see more police officers tackling issues like antisocial behaviour, tackling issues like domestic abuse and burglary. And thanks to the initiatives of John Dwyer, the excellent Police and Crime Commissioner in Cheshire, and sustained recruitment by the new Chief Constable, the hard work of our police officers is paying off, with almost a 50% increase in arrests for domestic abuse in Cheshire over the last 12 months compared to the last 12 months. Can my right honourable friend update the House on how many more officers have been recruited in both Cheshire and across the UK since he became the Prime Minister? And will he join me in recognising...
Mr. Prime Minister, can I just say, other members do want to get in. The longer the question, the less will get in. Your friendship will dwindle if you carry on like that. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell him very briefly, it's 13,576 more police officers, 200 more in Cheshire, Mr. Speaker. But what they're also doing, Mr. Speaker, is they're cutting neighbourhood crime already by 31%. Our streets are getting safer as a result.
Sorry.
Thank you. A clear majority of members of the Northern Ireland Assembly reject the government's protocol bill and the Prime Minister's rationale for it, and businesses fear its consequences. This Prime Minister has made clear on multiple occasions his commitment, so-called, to all aspects of the Good Friday Agreement. Consensus. That includes the European Convention on Human Rights being part of domestic law. So how can he stand over that commitment when the Justice Secretary is about to publish a bill that unpicks and disapplies the Human Rights Act within our domestic law? He can't have it both ways.
I think if the honourable gentleman will just wait for the Justice Secretary's statement, which follows shortly, I think he will find that he is in error in what he's just said.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. High-wage, high-skilled jobs is at the heart of my campaign to level up Rother Valley and tackle the cost of living crisis. I have personally hosted 2 job fairs, and thanks to £11 million investment for the government's Levelling Up Fund, Rother Valley will benefit from a cutting-edge skills and employment village and a leading incubator space for training apprenticeships and start-ups hosted to the old Maltby Grammar School. Staff areas were neglected under Labour. In light of this, will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, pledge his support for high-wage, high-skilled Rother Valley, level up our high streets and also visit Rother Valley to see levelling up in action?
Yes, I think probably the best member for Rother Valley that we've ever had, Mr. Speaker. I thank him very much, and we're going to continue with our agenda of levelling up across the whole country, through all the difficulties that this country has faced, and it will get young people across the country and in Rother Valley into good jobs for generations to come, and that is our ambition. Osborne.
Speaker, tens of thousands of people were marching through London last weekend, protesting against this out-of-touch government. Rail workers are on strike, Royal Mail workers, NHS workers, teachers and even barristers are on the verge of taking industrial action. All workers are struggling to cope with the worst cost of living crisis in history. Ministers are planning to boost city bosses' pay whilst demanding wage restraint for everyone else. So can the Prime Minister tell me when is he going to stop meaningless sound bites and instead start supporting working people across our country?
If she wants to support the working people of this country, Mr. Speaker, can I suggest she gets off the picket line? And supports the and has a word with her leader, Mr. Speaker, and supports the travelling public of this country who want to see a reduction in their costs of transport, which this government is delivering.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For much of Britain, levelling up means the revitalisation of British industry and the jobs that goes with it. Many countries around the world, such as Germany and China, get a competitive advantage by burning lignite, the dirtiest form of fossil fuel. So does my right honourable friend share my concerns about the ethics of holding back British industry and exporting and magnifying our carbon emissions overseas, all in the name of net zero?
Mr. Speaker, I think we can all be proud of the way we've reduced CO2 emissions in this country, but plainly it makes no sense to be importing coal, particularly for metallurgical purposes, when we have our own domestic resources.
Louise Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister knows that we in Coventry and Warwickshire are proudly the UK's leading centre for battery vehicle innovation. He knows because he visited the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre just last year. If this government wants this vital sector to survive for the future, the Prime Minister needs to confirm his support. Will he give a concrete guarantee for the resources needed for the West Midlands Gigafactory project to go ahead so we can deliver much-needed skilled jobs in Coventry for 2025?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's probably the first sensible question from the opposition benches, and I can tell her that we do actively support gigafactories because I believe they can be of huge advantage for the UK economy. That's why I'm proud to see one now in Blyth. We're working with the authorities in the West Midlands, in Coventry, to make sure that we also get a successful result there.
Sir Bill Wiggin.
Hereford Sixth Form College has over 600 students who rely on the trains to get them to their exams this week. What can my right honourable friend do to ensure that these young people doing their GCSEs and A-levels are not punished by the train strikers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know how much my right honourable friend cares for students in his constituency, and I can tell him that no exams have been cancelled as a result of the strikes so far. We expect schools and colleges to have contingency arrangements in place to manage disruption. If students arrive late, then schools should allow them to take the paper, and exam boards will determine if that paper can be marked based on how late the student is. And I'm told that, Mr. Speaker, if the student misses the exam completely, the school can apply for their grade to be calculated from the other assessments they have completed in that subject. And I hope that is helpful to my right honourable friend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware of the problems that arose in Paris at the European Cup final. Will he agree with me that both the French and YouView authorities' attempts to blame Liverpool fans for the failure to keep order at the stadium has been comprehensively disproven? And will he ensure that the French failure to police the event is roundly condemned?
I thank him very much, Mr. Speaker, and I think the whole House will have seen how those initial accounts of what took place were completely debunked and proved to be incorrect in respect of the Liverpool fans, and I think it was right that the French authorities and I think UEFA issued a full apology for what took place.
Sir Desmond Swade.
Taking back control is to apply to the ECHR too, isn't it?
Mr. Speaker, I think he should wait for my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, who will be saying a little bit about that in just a moment. But I can tell him that when it comes to the Rwanda policy that we are pursuing, that policy, Mr. Speaker, has not been ruled unlawful by any UK court, nor so far by any international court, Mr. Speaker. And we will continue with that policy.
Lyra Wilson.
Much, Mr. Speaker. The father-in-law of my constituent, Ibrahim, is a former Supreme Court judge in Afghanistan. He successfully prosecuted and put behind bars hundreds of terrorists associated with the Taliban, Al-Qaeda and ISIS. 7 months on since he put in his Arab application, there is no progress. He's living in hiding. His only option is a perilous journey to Pakistan, where if his visa is refused, he will be deported back into the hands of the Taliban. So, will the Prime Minister meet with me and the former judge's family to see how we can save the life of a man who I have no doubt has helped save hundreds of British lives?
Well, can I thank her very much for raising that particular case, and it does sound extremely meritorious, and I'll make sure that she gets a meeting with the Department of Defence that runs ARAP, Mr. Speaker, and that we do our best to expedite that application as fast as we can.
To Ben Spass.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to represent over 1,000 Park Home residents. When will the government address the injustice of pitch fees determined by RPI, and how is the government going to ensure they can all benefit from the energy grant?
I thank the honourable gentleman, my honourable friend. We are going to introduce legislation as soon as parliamentary time allows to change the inflationary index used in calculating the annual pitch fee to CPI, Mr. Speaker, and I'm told that the Department for Levelling Up and Housing has undertaken research on the impacts on residents and site owners of a change to the 10% commission that is currently paid on the sale of a park home.
Caroline Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Prime Minister is as thrilled as I am that you, Mr. Speaker, signed the Wellbeing of Women Menopause Pledge last week to show support for women in this place. So will the Prime Minister follow Mr. Speaker's example and ensure the better access to treatment for women in England by introducing the single annual payment for HRT now, not make them wait till April 23, a full 18 months after it was first promised?
I thank her very much for raising what is a very important issue, and one that is understood keenly on all sides of this House. And I know that my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is accelerating the work of the HRT task force to give people up and down the country the reassurance and the treatment that they need.
Final question, Dean Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was incredibly grateful that the Prime Minister launched my initiative to train 1,000 mental health first aiders in awareness in Watford over a year and a half ago, and it's being successfully delivered by Watford and West Herts Chamber of Commerce and many amazing volunteers. So I know he understands the importance of mental well-being and mental health. Sadly, bullying can have a long-lasting effect on mental health and well-being. So today, the Diana Award are raising awareness about bullying in schools and online, and with the Don't Face It Alone campaign. So will the Prime Minister please join me in encouraging any young person experiencing bullying to speak up and speak out.
Can I thank him very much and congratulate him on his own campaign on this issue. I think everybody understands that bullying is an absolutely appalling experience and something that we should not tolerate in our society. And I'm delighted to see so many colleagues, so many honourable members wearing their blue ribbons today, Mr. Speaker. We should all speak out against bullying, but we should also make sure that we give everybody the courage to speak out against bullying as well.
That ends PMQs. Those who wish to leave, please do so.
Prime Minister's Questions is over, and I'd like to welcome Khalid Mahmood, Labour MP for Birmingham Perry-Barr, and Craig McKinley, Conservative MP for South Thanet, who is still with us. Khalid, I know you had a tortuous journey. Thank you for sticking with it. We had a little bit of time with Craig before Prime Minister's Question Time, so I want to get some balance and ask a few questions of you. What would you have asked the Prime Minister today at Prime Minister's Question Time?
Well, I think my questions would have been around the cost of living, obviously, and to do with the inflation and the interest rates, which are really affecting everybody and hurting everybody. I think those have been my priorities.
Well, I'll ask you about that a bit more in a second. But first of all, the two big by-elections tomorrow. Wakefield is particularly important for the Labour Party. How well does your party have to do tomorrow? Is a win enough, or do you have to win big?
I think it'll be a good win tomorrow. I've been up there, I've spoken to the people, we've seen the people on the ground, and I think we will get a reasonable win, and it'll be a positive win to show how the tide has turned, and particularly those so-called red wall seats.
Indeed. Indeed. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, will be making a statement. It's been well-trailed today to enable the British government to overrule European judges. They will consider what European judges have to say, but they don't have to follow it. And, of course, what's prompted this turnaround is the decision last week to stop the removal of illegal immigrants to Rwanda. Does the Labour Party support that?
I think we are a country of rules. We are the nation that started predominantly all through our reign across the world, through the empires. We've survived on rules and regulations that were set across. That's how we managed. And for us now to wheedle our way out of that, I don't think is us. It's what the nation is about. It's what we should do is abide by rules that are there across there. And we haven't actually fully tested all of the courts here yet. And in the next month or so, that'll be done, and then we'll see what happens.
Did it stick in your throat last week when the plane was ready to take off to Rwanda, but that legal challenge, not by our own courts, but by the European court, prevented that flight taking off with as many illegal immigrants?
Well, this is a huge waste of money in the first instance. I think the Home Secretary has, by and large, failed herself and failed the nation in what she's done. Huge amounts of people on dinghy boats risking their lives to cross. And they keep saying that this model has to be broken. The model will not be broken. There's still people coming through now as we speak to that. What we have to do is speak to Europe, speak to France, and speak how we can get that deals together to stop them coming across.
What do you say to that, Craig? They're still coming?
Well, they are. I was hoping... I don't think Rwanda deal is ideal. I really don't think it's ideal. What would be ideal is if France would take up that broad and expansive offer that the Prime Minister made them on the back of that 27 deaths last year, that appalling event in November, where the Prime Minister offered President Macron, well, how many troops, border force, what help do you need to stop the beach launchings? Because in my view, that would stop this in a fortnight.
Taxpayers have paid loads of money, haven't they, to the French
we have.
police, and it doesn't work.
No, there hasn't. I mean, it did sort of work in terms of strengthening the port of Calais so that the back of the lorry route has been prevented largely. Right. This is a new route, and thus far, I don't hear from Khalid or any of his colleagues, what is the way we solve this? We cannot have 40, 50, 60, 100,000 people coming over under this method every year. This is chaos. It has to be stopped. So hence we've reached for Rwanda. I would rather the French actually said, great, guys, we've got a problem area. It's 20 miles of beach that we're struggling to patrol. You're going to offer some help. we'll take that, thanks very much, because this would stop it. To me, that is the answer.
Well, equally, I don't want people to be in dinghies. I don't want people losing their lives through that. That's horrendous. I don't want that to happen. What I want our government to do, and I want the Home Secretary to do, is to going to have some real meetings to discuss this issue. The Home Secretary has hardly been over there to discuss any of these issues. Instead, she's found to spend huge amounts of money in Rwanda deal and everything else, which is a huge waste of taxpayer money. We need to address this issue and allow people that are proper. She's also said that she'll be looking at safe routes. To date, she hasn't done that. And that's a real issue, is get the safe routes sorted out, stop this horrendous way of getting people across here through dinghies. And people are desperate to that. So we need to have clear, safe passages to do that and keep everybody else out.
OK. All right. Let us move on. So Khalid said that the British government should be talking to the French government about that. But there's other calls or another issue where the government has been criticised for not taking part in talks, and that is the rail strikes. Network Rail are negotiating with the train unions, but not the Transport Secretary. My goodness. And let's face it, it's particularly bad down here. There are parts of the country where the impact of rail strikes is not felt so harshly. But we can't carry on like this. We need the government to get involved, don't we? Because Network Rail can't solve it.
Well, the rail companies are independent companies. I mean, some of them are now under the government umbrella because of the huge losses. And the British taxpayer, you and I, all of us here, have paid billions, 16 billion, to the various train companies to keep every single job. Every one of those union jobs have been saved across the COVID period. £600 a household. Is this really the thanks that we get as a nation? Keeping people from work. I mean, I don't know about you, Khalid. It took me 3 hours of wasted time yesterday. Multiply that up by millions of people, and that's a lot of lost earnings. And I'm sure a lot of people just had to take a day off in lieu or a day off unpaid. That is the reality of this. This is so last year, and I heard the PM, I mean, he prayed an aid to a couple of 1980s things that you might have missed, Khalid. Karma Chameleon from Culture Club, one of my favourites, of course, yes. and Arthur Scargill. He prayed an aid to Arthur Scargill.
Never been seen in the same room together, Boy George and Arthur Scargill.
Is it the role of government to be speaking to every single sector that's unionised? The government doesn't get involved with Tesco's pay deals. I mean, that's, frankly, so last year. I don't think it is their position to do so.
Tesco survive on commercial agreements, and there's a market there for them to be competing. The rail companies don't. The rail companies are subsidised by us with huge amounts of money, with tracks that are already laid down by us. And I think one of the key issues in resolving that is, instead of giving all that money to them, and then they make money on top of that for the shareholders, is to start to... And many people who say they start to take back railways into government and deal with it properly. The Secretary of State has responsibility, because as much as he has to direct those companies, the money he gives them, and so therefore it's his responsibility to do that.
Khalid, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, he ordered members of the front bench to stay away from picket lines. 4 defied him. Should they be disciplined in some way for defying him?
Well, look, the Labour Party is a union of trade union, is a party of trade unions, is built by the trade unions. We have to look at supporting the working class people. And what we must do, importantly, what we must do is look at, once the unions have gone through the horrendous legislation, anti-trade union legislation put through by Maggie Thatcher. We're not in the 70s, as the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister keep saying. The unions have to jump through all sorts of hoops to get to this stage. I don't want us to get to this stage. I don't want to have these strikes, but I want equally the government, the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State to negotiate this and to do that. And I think what we have to do is ensure that the right at the end of the day to withdraw Labour is there, and that's important to do that.
What about the working classes who couldn't get to work at all yesterday and probably had no...
Yeah, well, let's speak to the Secretary of State to do that. Yes, let's do that.
Well, are you concerned about the fact that the Network Rail boss is paid nearly 20 times more than a striking train guard?
This discussion happens a lot across all banking, and I think that was referred to in PMQs today. I say these are private companies. They can set their own wage rates, and shareholders can get involved. Well, that's a broad and expansive thing, isn't it? Would you want to get involved with a proper owner-managed business that's doing well? Is that the role of government?
It's doing well because it gets a huge amount of subsidy from government. And that's what they do well. And so essentially what we're doing is filling the pockets of those executives and the shareholders of those companies to do that. We've got to start to look at this. The French have proven that you can have a decent train company that works. So has Germany. A lot of Europe has done that. And they've got fantastic train services, modernised train services. I want modernised train service. I want modernised working conditions for the workers that are there. I want us to work together to achieve that. And the government's got to play a role in that.
I mean, I do think there is a certain immorality, frankly, of earning huge multiples more than the average staff in any business. But that's a decision for businesses to decide.
Just finally, there's going to be a 10% increase in pensions next year. So all our mums and dads, if they're still with us, will be really happy. Why is that not inflationary, yet a wage increase for people who are struggling to make ends meet in work would be inflationary, as in the case of the
Yeah, well, I heard that yesterday from the Treasury, that general wage demands going up could fuel the wage price spiral, which is, you've got to live through the 70s to know what that means. I mean, inflation is the most absolutely corrosive economic effect, where those who might have saved all their lives, they've got their little nest egg, and lo and behold, next year, that nest egg is worth 10% less, because whatever they're earning out of it in interest is just not keeping up. But this is the big conundrum. How do we stop inflation? But to your point of your question, yes, I did find it a little bit odd that wage prices increase is bad, pension increase is good. So I suppose it goes back to...
OK, I'm going to bring Khalid in because
inflation is caused by not having enough of a workforce. We're shrinking our economy. Let's expand our economy, get rid of that, pay the pensioners what they deserve and pay the workers what they deserve. That's what we need to do.
Brilliant. Let's bring in our political reporter now, Catherine Forster. What did you make of Prime Minister's Question Time, Catherine?
The blame game is really in full swing now, isn't it? With both parties saying the other was behaving very badly, none of which actually helps the travelling public or these strikes be resolved. Boris Johnson is very keen to link the strikes to Labour, to the unions. He was helped with that, wasn't he, by the fact that Kate Osborne, the Labour MP for Jarrow, had a question. She was on the picket lines yesterday, along with, I think, about 20 other MPs. Specifically, Sir Keir Starmer had asked them not to. But, of course, there is that link. So Boris Johnson is now saying, they're standing with the strikers, they're holding hands with Arthur Scargill. They would take us back to the 1970s. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer is saying, well, in some respects, we're already there. We've got high taxes, we've got rampant inflation, we've got low growth. He's saying, do your job. You are in charge. You are the government. Get this mess sorted. And so, everybody is blaming everybody else. I thought it was interesting. Keir Starmer is very much not in jokey mode this week. Last week, he was trying to prove that he was not boring. And remember the Star Wars jokes? That's gone. And I think both are very mindful that these two big by-elections tomorrow, and they're hoping every vote counts. And what will happen? We will find out very soon, won't we?
Well, we have been to Wakefield, where the by-election has been called. That was after Imran Ahmed Khan was found guilty of sexual assault on a teenage boy. This by-election will show if Labour are set back on track to win the red wall they lost in 2019. Our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, has been speaking to the people of Wakefield.
The media and the bubble, as they're called down in London, think that us Northerners don't really know what we're talking about. We're not as educated, we've not been to the universities or whatever that they have, but we're not daft. We know what's going on in the world, and we're not going to be had over by these people. And I just hope that a lot of similar people to me, and I'm born in Wakefield, brought up in Wakefield. My dad was a coal miner. I'm from 3 generations of mining people, and really I should be a socialist, but I aren't.
Don't get rid of Boris. I love Boris. I'm sorry, I do. Really just say that? Well, they just had a party which was out of order. They've both done it. They've all done it. More than one party.
Well, I'm sorry. I have a brother who had lost his wife in lockdown. I've got 2 brothers that lost their wives in lockdown, and one of them particularly had his couple of daughters in his garden and his grandson, because it was his grandson's birthday, and the police called and he got fined. And he was literally had just lost his wife. So that's how I, But at the end of the day, the government set the rules, and if they can't abide by their own rules, why should anybody else?
I've been quite around town. I've seen nothing about any candidates or anything like that. Am I supposed to say anything about candidates? I've literally not, no.
I just think Labour went off the boil in this area and they weren't really bothered. And I liked a lot of Conservative ideas.
So you voted Conservative in 2019?
I did.
But now you might not?
Now I might not know.
There are 15 candidates standing in Wakefield. They are Sir Archibald Stanton Earl Eaton from the official monster-raving Looney Party, Nadeem Ahmed for the Conservatives, Afek Akbar, who's independent, Paul Bickerdike from the Christian People's Alliance, Mick Dodgson of the Freedom Alliance, Jada Franson, an independent, Jordan Gaskell for the UK Independence Party, David Hurdson of the Yorkshire Party, Therese Hayest from the English Democrats, Christopher Jones from the Northern Independence Party, Simon Lightwood for Labour, Jamie Needle from the Liberal Democrats, Ash Routh of the Green Party, Ashley Simon from Britain First, and Chris Walsh from Reform UK. And of course, there's another by-election down in Devon tomorrow. The vacancy in Tiverton and Honiton was caused by the resignation of Conservative MP Neil Parish after he admitted to viewing pornography on his phone in the House of Commons. Our reporter Jeff Moody has been talking to voters there.
Tranquil, trusting and Tory. They voted Conservative here since the 1930s, but in this rural backwater, many traditional voters are now no longer going with the flow. And it's almost inconceivable such has been Conservative support here. They backed Brexit by 58%. They have an ageing population, 28% are over 65, and unemployment is low. But this by-election is not just about the policies. This is Conservative heartland, the rural agricultural southwest. It should be an easy win for the Conservatives. But talking to people on the streets of Tiverton and Honiton today, it's not the policies they're so concerned with, it's the man.
Partygate just exemplifies the attitude that seems to be that rules are for poor people, not for the governing body.
Fair enough, give them a fine. That's it. Don't have to be such a big thing and a big, oh, they've done wrong.
We need a very strong leader and one that will get things going, such as Boris Johnson did with the vaccines and all of those issues. You also need someone with integrity, and so that's why I haven't decided yet.
There's residue too from the resignation of their former MP, Neil Parish.
Extremely bad. Watching pornography when he should have been doing something else. He was supposed to be watching tractors, but he wasn't watching about tractors.
Well, I wouldn't lump together a whole party based on the acts of one individual, so I'm glad that he's no longer in Parliament. But yeah, I feel like the Conservatives is the main vote for like the Brexit supporting people.
We asked Labour and the Conservatives to talk to us. Both candidates said they're far too busy today meeting voters to talk to us. Well, busy they might be. The Conservatives have a 24,000 majority, but the Lib Dems are snapping at their heels, and that's making them anxious. At the Lib Dem campaign HQ, foot soldiers have been drafted in, and the party faithful are buoyed by an internal poll that puts them level pegging with the Tories.
The first thing people tend to want to talk about is Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. People often want to talk about issues of a lack of honesty and integrity at the top of politics. And it's not about Partygate per se, it's more around what that represents. It's more about lies told to Parliament and the resignation of ethics advisors, for example.
At the last election, just 15% voted for the Lib Dems, 60% went to the Conservatives. Turning this around will be a gargantuan feat for the Liberals. They think they can do it. The voters aren't so sure.
Well, what's the alternative? Put it that way. I can't see an alternative at the moment. They're giving Boris a pretty hard time and he doesn't deserve it. By and large, he's doing OK.
And that's the question that people here are asking themselves. Is OK enough? Or is Partygate now just water under the bridge? Jeff Moody, GB News.
And as Jeff Moody said there, we did offer the Conservative and Labour candidates the opportunity to be interviewed for the report, but they both declined. There are 8 candidates standing in the Tiverton and Honiton by-election. They are Jordan Donoghue Morgan for the Heritage Party, Andy Fawn for Reform UK, Richard Ford for the Liberal Democrats, Helen Herford for the Conservatives, Liz Paul for Labour, Frankie Ruffalo for the For Britain movement, Ben Walker for UKIP and Jill Westcott for the Green Party. Catherine, interesting voices there.
Weren't they? Weren't they? And not a huge amount of love for the Prime Minister amongst them. Obviously, some people still saying, give him a break, he's great. But this was the man that had the magic touch, the Heineken touch. He could reach the people that nobody else could. And I know lots of Conservative MPs like to say, Partygate, bit of cake, well, nobody cares. Actually, a lot of people still do care, as we heard in the exchange with those 2 ladies, one of whom said, oh, you know, bit of cake, whatever. And the other one said, well, somebody died in my family. So it will be fascinating to see what happens. I think, obviously, they're expecting to lose Wakefield, but who knows what will happen in Honiton.
We've got about 20 seconds left of the programme. I want to get my final thought from you. It's not just about the leaders. It is about the cost of living too. Give me one thing that the government should do to help people.
It should be taking taxes of things that are going up massively in value. So more tax cuts on fuel, domestic fuel and pump fuel. That would help.
Grow the economy. Simple as that. Grow the economy. That's what we've got to do.
Khaled and Craig, been a pleasure as ever. Thank you for being with me. Khaled Mahmood there from Birmingham, Perry Barr for Labour and Craig McKinley, Conservative MP for South Fanner. You have been watching or listening to PMQs Live with me, Gloria De Piero. Join me again tomorrow at noon. Coming up, it is On the Money with Liam Halligan. Before that, it is time to take a look at the brilliant weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weather is on the change over the next few days, but today, if you like blue sky, well, you're in for a treat. Certainly across most of England and Wales, it's fine, sunny and warmer than yesterday. It is a little cloudy across the northwest thanks to this weather front, and this one is approaching from the south, and that one could bring us some heavy downpours later tomorrow. But for today, as I said, most places set fair, dry, fine, lots of sunshine.